Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint River Basin Drought and Water webinar for the month of March. My name is Rachel McGuire, and I am with the Auburn University Water Resources Center located in Auburn, Alabama. If you're new to the webinar, we'll have time for comments, questions, and discussion at the end of the webinar after our last speaker. Throughout the webinar, feel free to use the question box on the GoToMeeting tool panel to type in your questions, or you can use the raise your hand function by pressing the hand icon on that same GoToMeeting tool panel. Today's speakers will be David Zierden, the state climatologist of Florida at the Florida Climate Center, part of Florida State University. He'll be describing our current drought status as well as seasonal forecasts and outlooks for the region. We also have Michael Harper from the Alabama Office of Water Resources, who will present the state of Alabama input. We have Paul Inghorn from the USGS South Atlantic Water Science Center, presenting our streamflow and groundwater conditions. We have Troy Ephraim of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District with our ACF reservoir conditions. I'll be presenting on behalf of Samantha Lucas of the Apalachicola Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve with salinity information. If you have been to previous webinars, it's been about a year or two since we've had this data, so we're happy to have them back along providing that data set. And last but not least, we'll have Jeff Dober of the National Weather Service Southeast River Forecast Center. As a quick reminder, presenters, just let me know when you'd like your next slide advanced. And with that, I'll start with our first speaker, David Zierden, when you're ready.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Rachel, and good afternoon, everyone. We will go ahead and begin this webinar like we usually do with weather and climate events that are in the news. And this month it is severe weather across the Deep South. This is an event, a very vigorous low pressure system that traversed the Deep South last week. And here's some of the information from it. Over on the left, we see a tornado on the ground right outside of Selma, Alabama on March 17th. And we also have a picture of some of the damage from these tornadoes. But also, this was a very well forecast event. We see the day one convective outlook from NOAA's the Storm Prediction Center, where a broad area across central Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana was given the highest risk, high risk of, or nearly 45% chance of a tornado occurring within a 50-mile radius of any point within there. But you also notice a very broad area of moderate and enhanced risk that went along with this system. So it verified pretty well. Over on the right is all the storm reports for tornadoes and damaging wind and hail. At last count, there were 49 confirmed tornado reports from this system last week. On the next slide, we'll put it in a little climatological perspective, and this is the severe weather climatology from the Storm Prediction Center that shows the Deep South and what we call Dixie Alley is really the center of action at this time of year in the early spring. And further complicating matters is there is a connection with the El Nino La Nina cycle. Over on the right, all the grid boxes shaded in orange and red show where during the La Nina phase, like we have this year, tornado activity is actually enhanced from January all the way through the spring season. So we've got just the long-term climatology and the phase of the Pacific Ocean kind of working with us on this severe event last week. And on the next slide, we're not done yet. We've got another vigorous low that's traveling across the southern United States right now. There have been tornado warnings and severe thunderstorm warnings across southern Louisiana and Mississippi already this morning. But this is the day 3 convective outlook from the Storm Prediction Center valid for Thursday. And again, it shows a very broad area of enhanced and slight risk for severe weather. And as this event gets closer, I imagine those categories will even ramp up a little bit tomorrow and on Thursday. So once again, keep your eye to the sky and your weather radio alerts on, because we have another possibly dangerous situation coming later this week. On the next slide, we'll go ahead and shift gears on why we're all here to talk about the drought situation in the Apalachicola, Chattahoochee, Flint, and the greater Southeast. And here's the current U.S. Drought Monitor, and it shows an area of moderate drought across kind of west central Alabama and other areas of abnormally dry across Alabama and up into northwest Georgia, and also covering most of the peninsula of Florida. While these areas of abnormally dry have kind of come and gone over the past few weeks, the area of D1 or moderate drought in Alabama has remained, and we might actually see some moderate drought being introduced into Florida with this week's drought monitor. So we'll go ahead into the next slide, and especially as we get into the spring and summer months, we like to look at University of Alabama Huntsville's Lawn and Garden Moisture Index, and it echoes the drought monitor. It shows moist conditions across northwest Alabama, but once we get into central and south Georgia and most of the state of Florida, we're seeing things start to dry out now. And also we're entering a time of the year where the amount of effective rainfall that kind of drives this drought index increases. So now it's going to start responding more quickly to dry periods, and which is appropriate as we come out of the winter dormancy period. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at recent rainfall, and this is the 7-day rainfall accumulations radar estimated. And we do see heavier amounts of 2, 3, 4 inches or more across central and northwest Alabama. But South Alabama and most of Georgia and the Florida Panhandle are shades of green or blue, only corresponding to 1 to 2 inches of rainfall over the past week. And we also see that most of the peninsula of Florida was bone dry over the last week. So we'll go to the next slide and look at the 30-day accumulations, or over the past month, and it kind of solidifies this story. We see the greens and yellows in the upper ACF basin and North Georgia corresponding to only 1.5 to 2.5 inches of rainfall over the last month, which is well below normal. We see heavier amounts over North Alabama and the swath of west central Alabama where the severe weather happened. And we see near normal amounts across the middle ACF basin, but once again, once we get into the Florida Panhandle and the lower basin, amounts of only 2 to 3 inches over the last month, which is again is well below normal. On the next slide, instead of looking at accumulations, we'll look at departures from normal over the last 90 days. And this tells more of the story. We can see the much above normal rainfall from the Florida Panhandle across most of South Georgia and into the Carolinas. However, the peninsula of Florida, we've seen deficits continue to grow over the last 3 months, as well as South Central Alabama and even portions of North Georgia. So we'll go on to the next slide and start taking a look ahead. And with this really vigorous low pressure system, we're already seeing some torrential rainfall in southern Louisiana and southern Mississippi. And that's going to continue for the next day or two. And this is the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast that shows heavy amounts over most of Mississippi and Alabama. But here on the Alabama-Georgia state line, where most of the ACF basin is located, we're kind of in the gradient between forecasted heavier amounts and lesser amounts as you move further east. And once again, in the 7-day forecast, not much rain at all forecast for the Florida Peninsula. On the next slide, since we're in the spring of the year and things are warming up, and we're more susceptible to drought, we'll keep a closer look on near-term forecast. And this is the week 2 forecast from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, which shows for most of the United States, good chances of above normal temperatures or warmer than normal temperatures. And also over on the right is the precipitation forecast, where much of the, or all of the ACF basin has increased chances of below normal rainfall in week 2. So it looks like after this next low pressure system, things will stabilize a little more, and we'll get to warmer and drier spring weather across the southeast. So on the next slide, we'll look a little further ahead and begin by looking at the state of the Pacific Ocean. And the top map shows current sea surface temperature anomalies or departures from normal. And we see that classic cold tongue, or the classic signature of colder than normal waters along the equator, has really warmed up in the last month. Not nearly as pronounced. Things in this region, the sea surface temperatures are warming quickly. On the bottom is our Nino 3.4 index, where in the last week or two, it's really flirting around that threshold of La Nina conditions at -0.5 degrees Celsius, and quite a pretty dramatic warm up from just the previous week or two. So things are warming up in the Pacific Ocean. On the next slide, we'll see what that means for the forecast going forward. And the bar graphs over on the left show the probabilities of La Nina conditions continuing, which are strong through the February, March, and April time period. But as we get into March, April, May, and April, May, and June, those chances drop dramatically. So it looks like we're on kind of the death throes of this La Nina episode. During the summer, neutral conditions are the preferred forecast. There are some models hinting that we might have a return of La Nina conditions next fall, but it's way too early to count on that. It often does happen. We do get these multi-year La Nina events, but a lot of uncertainty around that right now. And over on the right, if you look at the different models, you can see quite the spread, most of them hovering around the neutral conditions throughout the summer. So on the next slide, just a reminder of what La Nina conditions bring us. We get a jet stream configuration similar to what's shown over on the right, which leaves the northern Gulf Coast, much of the southeast, warmer and drier than normal, typically during La Nina, both in the winter and spring. And over on the left just shows the composite of all past La Nina events and the rainfall departures from normal if you put them all together. And you see much drier than normal across the northern Gulf Coast, the peninsula of Florida, Texas, and the Southwest. However, on the next slide, in the spirit of full disclosure, this winter's seasonal forecast went dreadfully wrong. Over on the left is the temperature and rainfall outlooks from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center for the months of December, January, and February. Where over on the right is what actually fell in those 3 months. The precipitation on the top right, temperature departures from normal on the bottom right. And we see temperature and precipitation during the winter months, instead of being drier than normal, most of the southeast was actually a little wetter than normal, especially up through the Carolinas and Virginia. And the temperature verification was even more dramatic. Due to that Arctic air outbreak, we see that Texas and the deep south were actually colder than normal during the winter months, exactly the opposite of what was forecast. So what went wrong? We had a series of polar vortex disruptions and a consistently negative North Atlantic and Arctic oscillation. And those kind of overwhelmed the typical impacts of La Nina on the jet stream. And so we can consider this seasonal forecast pretty much of a bust. So on the next slide, with that cautionary tale in mind, we'll look at the current seasonal outlook for the next 3 months, April, May, and June. Over on the left is the temperature outlook, where most of the lower 48 has increased chances of above normal temperatures throughout the spring. Over on the right is the precipitation forecast, where much of the southeast and the ACF basin is just given equal chances, meaning above, below, or near normal are all equally likely. So on the next slide, we'll go ahead and wrap up with the seasonal drought outlook. We see the area of moderate drought in west central Alabama is forecast to remain, but possibly improve. However, drought development and worsening is likely over the Florida Peninsula. So we'll go ahead and wrap up with take-home messages. We had a severe weather outbreak last week on March 17th and 18th, 49 confirmed tornadoes. Now we have an additional threat coming later this week on late Wednesday and Thursday. Looking at drought, abnormally dry or D0 persists and is actually spreading over peninsular Florida. And the moderate drought area over western Alabama is remaining and also enlarging a little bit also. But looking at recent rainfall, we've seen below normal rainfall at 7 and 30 days over the upper and lower ACF basin, much above normal across the Florida Panhandle and South Georgia when looking at 90-day departures. The active pattern to continue this week, bringing heavy rain to South Louisiana, South Alabama, and even parts of the Florida Panhandle. But the week 2 forecast is favoring warmer and drier. The La Nina advisory continues, but looks to be decaying very quickly. The CPC seasonal forecast favors above normal temperatures and equal chances for rainfall. And drought development is a risk as temperatures warm this spring, and the seasonal reduction in rainfall we see in April and early May. And this is especially going to be true over peninsular Florida.
Thank you, David. And now I'll turn it over to Michael Harper of the Alabama Office of Water Resources for State of Alabama input when you are ready, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Go ahead. So this is the State of Alabama Drought Monitor slide we saw earlier. And what's interesting to note here is the D1 and central and west central Alabama. This drought monitor does not reflect the rainfall event that occurred with the severe weather on the 17th. You know, the cutoff for that is 7 a.m. on Tuesday, and then we had the big rain event on Wednesday. So I expect to see some drastic changes in this map this week. Okay, go ahead. As a result of our last MIG meeting, the state of Alabama revised the Alabama Drought Declaration to what you see here, where a large portion of the central part of the state and the southwest in an advisory status. But as far as the ACF counties goes, there's very little, if any, counties that are affected by this declaration in the ACF. Go ahead. Again, this is just our website. It's a new website. We have unveiled a new version. It's still the same links we have before, just a different look. Some updated information will be coming very soon as far as different things related to drought overall with the state. So just to get to the high points here, the abnormally dry conditions that we've seen with the drought monitor have been increasing. They've been increasing for quite some time. However, the most recent rainfall event that we had last week did not make the cutoff for this map. So we do expect there to be improvements, especially to the western portions of this map. The eastern portions of the state did not receive quite the rainfall as the western half also did. We're continuing to monitor the implications of La Nina. So far, we have had very minimal impacts. Again, the drought declaration that I showed earlier was updated since our last webinar. We have no public water systems that have given us any indication of any water availability issues, and we are continuing to monitor conditions. We have an upcoming meeting of our monitoring and impact group as part of the Alabama Drought Planning and Assessment team. That meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April 13th at 1 o'clock Central Time. It is a virtual meeting. If you want to be included and you're not on the list to get these emails for these meetings, let us know, and we will get you guys, whoever wants one, we'll get you a invite to this meeting.
Thank you for the update, Michael.
You're welcome.
Now I'll turn it over to Paul Inkhorn with our stream flows and groundwater conditions. When you're ready, Paul.
Yes, Rachel, I'm ready. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin as we usually do by looking at flow conditions across the southeast as reported from our real-time network. So the image on the left is from the previous webinar, and then as of this morning, we're showing conditions on the right. So you can see as of this morning, we returned to normal conditions for the coastal plain. We had a lot of high flows showing up last webinar as indicated by the blue dots and black dots, and then as you dry out, the colors change from orange down to red. So you can see at the transition from coastal to Piedmont there to the midsection of the ACF basin, flow conditions are currently below normal, and then as we move further up the basin to the headwaters, conditions are showing to be normal, with a few stations ranking as above normal. But yeah, we've dried out a little bit since our last webinar, which that includes the severe weather that David pointed out from last week. So let's move to the next slide. And this shows the percentage of stream gauges in each of the flow conditions for the past 45 days. So you can see that rainfall that moved through in mid-February there. Around February 18th, we had about 95% of our gauges were showing above normal to high flows. And then as we moved through February into the beginning of March, we moved back into normal conditions. Then we started to dry out beginning the first week of March. The first 2 weeks of March, actually, we had around 40% of our gauges showing below normal or less. And then last week's rainfall returned some of the gauges back to normal, the normal flow conditions. So as of yesterday, we had 2% of our gauges in the Georgia network showing at much below normal, and then 11% below normal. But you can see majority, 68% of our stations are currently ranking at normal flow conditions. So that just gives you an idea of the trend for the past 45 days. All right, the next slide, we'll look at the below normal 7-day average stream flows. So this is an indication of hydrologic drought across, well, the map shows the whole US there, of course, and out west, certainly dry conditions there, but more locally through the southeast and the ACF basin, we're not showing any indication of hydrologic drought. There is a small portion down in southeast Alabama that is currently ranking below normal, but again, that's just a 7-day average that can change quickly. Okay, we'll move on to, these are 28-day average flows. So that's shown by the black line there. So the previous 28 days average flow is compared with historic mean flows for these stations based on the period of record. So Chattahoochee, Cornelia, and Dahlonega, these are the two main inflows into Lanier. And not a lot of change or fluctuation since our last webinar. So both sites are right in the normal zone and right around the 50th percentile. So we have normal flow flowing into Lanier. Let's change, move ahead. These are stations below Lake Lanier, so Chattahoochee River at Atlanta. Last webinar, we were in the above normal range. The last 4 weeks, we've dropped off slightly into the normal range. Same condition, although we started at normal at Whitesburg, we still remain within the normal ranking there. In the next slide, we'll stay in the Chattahoochee, just move downstream. So West Point, we're within the normal range there, and then Chattahoochee at Columbus, we are approaching below normal. So currently right around the 26th percentile. Okay, next slide, we'll move over to the Flint River. So starting at the top of the basin, Griffin and Carsonville, flows have reduced pretty steeply there in the last 4 weeks. Griffin has moved into below normal, and this is typically when we see, continued recharge within the basin. You can see a slope there, a historic slope, so that recharge period, generally moves through March, well into April, and then we start to see flows start to decline. But the 28-day average flow, as of today at least, is showing a steeper decline in flow there. And keep in mind, I mean, a good 2-inch rain could bring that back up into normal pretty quickly. But currently, yeah, we're showing below normal flow for those two stations. All right, the next slide is further downstream, Albany and Bainbridge. So Albany is right around 50th percentile, currently ranking normal. And Bainbridge, which has been above normal for the past 4 weeks, has just crossed back into the normal flow condition. Next slide will be our station at Apalachicola River at Chattahoochee, and same condition, same situation there rather. We moved from above normal to normal conditions. All right, that's surface water. We'll take a look now at groundwater. So the current brief there is it's a combination of a real-time network, which are the circular symbols, and then the square symbols are actually, they are continuous, but they're not real-time, so those are updated based on site visits. So the more current is obviously the real-time, and then we have 2 stations that are circled there, which are our sites that we look at each week. And so we'll begin on the next slide with our station at Miller County. So you see on the left, that's just straight off NWIS. That's the past 4 weeks. And then that data are plotted against historical elevations for that well based on the period of record. So we ended up moving from the much above ranking through above normal, and we just crossed into normal well elevation for Miller County. The next slide shows Doherty County. So for the last 4 weeks, we've pretty much ranked much above normal, and then as of today, conditions are still showing that well to be within the much above normal range, slowly trending down towards above normal. Okay, that's groundwater, and then I'll just wrap up with a quick summary here. So real-time stream flow in the basin, the ACF basin, currently ranked from much above normal to the low range, with the majority of stations ranked in normal range. The below normal 7-day average stream flow indicates that the ACF basin is hydrologically drought-free. 28-day average stream flow for the Chattahoochee River currently ranked from, they're all showing normal range. 28-day average stream flow for the Flint River, currently ranked from normal to below normal. And as I just showed, real-time groundwater levels across the basin range from much above normal to below normal, with the majority of sites ranking in the normal range. All right, that concludes it, Rachel. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Now I'll turn it over to Troy Ephraim with our ACF reservoir conditions. When you're ready, Troy.
Hey, Rachel, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Perfect. All right, we'll start at Lake Lanier in Beaufort. The midnight pool elevation was 1070.2. And here over the next 5 weeks, we project to remain in zone 1 as we pick up with the refill beginning in the middle of April. Next slide. We'll move down to West Point. The midnight pool elevation 630.59. And right now we're kind of riding the median line with the anticipation that we could have equal chances for normal conditions and normal hydrologic conditions for the ACF Basin. So we're holding slightly above guide curve right now to ensure that we can meet that 635 summer pool refill. Next slide. We'll move down to Waltrip, George, and the midnight pool elevation 188.95. And same thing here, we're going to ride close to that median line over the next 5 weeks. Next slide. At Lake Seminole and Jim Woodruff, the midnight pool elevation 77.32. And over the next 5 weeks, well, we projected that we'll be able to continue to meet our downstream flow requirements. All right, next slide. In summary, we will, as Paul stated, got the ACF composite storage, and we will be in zone 1 over the next 5 weeks. Now I think we're on the summary slide. And as Paul stated earlier, we're kind of seeing some normal flows into all of our projects within the ACF Basin. All of our projects are operating slightly above guide curve, and we project to stay there over the next 5 weeks.
All right, thank you, Troy.
So
And
Rachel.
Thank you very much. And now I'll be presenting on behalf of Samantha Lucas, but I believe starting next month, she'll be here with us to present the Apalachicola Bay daily average salinity levels. If you have been a long time attendee of these webinars, you may remember the salinity information being available previously. So to give you a little bit of context, this is data coming from the Apalachicola Bay NIR, and this is part of what is known as the Systemwide Monitoring Program that was originally started in 1995 and has since been revised several times. That essentially provides long-term monitoring for all of the NIRs throughout the United States and has standardized a lot of that water quality and nutrient level data collection. One of the core elements of the water quality monitoring program is salinity. These particular stations log every 15 minutes. And the reason we don't have Samantha here today is they're out on a field day, I believe, actually collecting some of this information. So the data you'll see is not up to date to today. I believe it's through February 23rd for some of these stations, but we'll see more updated information and data in April. So we have 3 stations to share with you, and this is just a screenshot of all of their different stations. This is just one parameter that their water quality stations are taking. So far this year, if you see that black line, That's the data that has been logged for 2021. And those percentile ranges and the colors behind that black line are daily average salinity data from 1992 until 2021. This station is Cap Point. You can see there's been a lot of fluctuation in the first couple months of 2021. Currently, well, I say currently, this is actually from late February. It's been holding in the 25th to 75th percentile. We'll have more updated data for you next month, but this is just a introduction to have this partner back on board. And this is the dry bar station that's got percentiles in the lowest category, actually the 10th percentile as of that February 23rd cutoff. And this is the same average data set from 1992 to 2021 once again. And that last station that we'll be tracking is East Bay Bottom, which is also in that lowest percentile for February 23rd. If you have any questions about these, I probably will not be the best person to answer them for you, but I can relay any questions you may have to Samantha, and I can follow up with you after this webinar if you have any. I apologize, I'm not as knowledgeable as the crew down at Apalachicola. And here's Samantha's contact info if you'd like to get in touch with her directly. Also, Jason Garwood is the research coordinator at Apalachicola Bay NIR, and they'd be happy to answer any questions about this data. Our last presenter for the day is going to be Jeff Dober with our streamflow forecasts. Let me know when you're ready, Jeff.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. And so we'll start off here showing the Ensemble river forecasts that go out 10 days, which takes us into the first week of April. And that orange shaded area, that is the most likely forecast. That's the most likely range as far as stream flows, as far as inflows into the lake. And as you can see, we do get a little bit of a wetter period here, as David pointed out, in a few days with some systems coming across. But the inflows are generally range from 2,000 to 4,000, and that's we've had several 5,000 to 7,000 CFS events since mid-February. So this is really nothing too out of the ordinary, but it will keep some fair amount of inflow going into the lake as we head into the first part of April. So let's go down to the next site here on the Chattahoochee near Whitesburg. And again, we see some of the similar flow ranges, nothing too out of the ordinary. As you can see, the categories on there, nothing over the next 10 days showing us any indication of flooding, so which is good. So pretty normal stream flows over the next 10 days. We go, let's jump over to the Flint River here, I think is the next slide. Yeah, so the Flint River near Lovejoy. And as Paul had pointed out, some of the upper Flint is now trending right on the cusp of below normal to near normal range. And so we are going to get another, again, it does indicate we may get a rain event or two here in the next 10 days, which should bump up some of the stream flows temporarily. But again, nothing in flooding, which is a good thing. And then we'll go down to, we'll jump all the way down to the lower end of the ACF here at Blountstown on the Apalachicola River. And for the most part, we see stream flows dropping off here. This is it has a large dependency on releases out of Woodruff Dam. And you can see, as you can see, not much fluctuation over the next week. And then maybe some flux there toward the early part of April. And that blue line, that sort of shows the outlier. So some uncertainty as we get out there on March 31st and April 1st. But for the most part, pretty average conditions as far as stream flows over the next 10 days are expected. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of any significant rain systems right now that are expected over those next 10 days. So as far as the 1 month forecast, if we jump to the next one. Oh, before I show that, one other thing I wanted to point out is this is the river flood climatology for the Georgia group, and we are in week 12 of the year. And that sort of puts us right on the sliding end of the curve for the primary recharge period and the primary flood season for the Georgia group. And over the next few weeks, typically what we see is the green wave or the vegetation coming out of dormancy, and that could, as well as what David pointed out, that our rainfall tends to decrease in Georgia in April. And those two combinations probably will send us on a downward slide as far as flood potential as we get into mid to late April for the ACF. So as far as the 1 month mean daily stream flow forecast, right now we're calling for near normal stream flows across the Chattahoochee, the Flint, and the Apalachicola. But with that being said, I think we could be right on that cusp, as Paul pointed out, between because we are at that peak period for stream flows at this time in this mid-March period. So we're going to be on the cusp for the Flint River, I think, between below normal and near normal through the month of April. So we'll have to watch that one closely. But for the remainder of the Chattahoochee and the Apalachicola, right now we're looking good at near normal stream flows during typically the peak period. And that'll be the case all the way into late April, as actually our normal stream flows fall off. And then as far as the 3 month forecast, now we're taking ourselves into the summer period, April, May, and June. And our Ensemble stream flow prediction pie charts now giving some indication of better chances at near normal stream flows, but we have seen since our last monthly briefing, the below normal percentages come up and the above normal percentages start to decline a bit from the last month. So all in all, based on what David had said, as well as Paul's briefing, we're looking at near normal stream flows as far as the forecast as we head through into the early summer period. So in summary, over the next 10 days, we're not expecting any flooding, and stream flows look relatively normal with some normal rainfall events over the next 10 days. And then the 1 month stream flow forecast looks near normal as well for most of the basins, but we'll have to watch that potentially below normal for especially the upper Flint River. And then in the 3 month stream flow forecast, right now it looks like near normal stream flows for most of that period as we head into the early summer. And I think that's all I had. If you would like to see additional 10-day Ensemble River forecast, you can go to the MMEFS web link as shown right there, or the official forecasts. You can see them at that web link as well. And that's all I had, Rachel.
Thank you, Jeff. And now's the time that we'll open up the floor for any questions, comments, or discussion from any of our attendees. You can use the question box or you can raise your hand.
Yeah, Rachel, this is David Zierden again.
Hey, David.
I just want to clarify one thing that I said when I talked about the winter outlook from the Climate Prediction Center being a busted forecast.
Yes.
That's really not the correct way to look at it. These outlooks are probabilistic forecasts, and they just show a shift in probabilities. So that's not a fair characterization to say it was a bust. Just it didn't go with the shift in probabilities.
Along those same lines, would you consider this past winter forecast to be a bit of an anomaly for La Nina, typical La Nina impacts? Would that be a more accurate representation?
Yeah, absolutely. Just we could say something along the lines of 8 out of 10 years you expect to see these kind of typical La Nina impacts, but this happened to be one of the 2 out of the 10 where we didn't.
All right, thanks for clarifying that up a bit. I know there's been a lot of talk, a lot of articles out there about how it was not the typical impact patterns that we see, which of course, yeah, as you point out, all these forecasts are based on probabilities. Any other comments or questions from the attendees? I'll give a little more time. You can still type in a question if you'd like, but in the meantime, I want to thank all of our presenters for their time today and the content they've provided, namely David Zierden, Michael Harper, Paul Inkhorn, Troy Ephraim, Jeff Dober, and content from Samantha Lucas. Next month, our webinar will be April 27th, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. A video recording of the webinar today will be posted online on the NIDIS YouTube channel within 48 hours. I'll also be sending out a summary email with a lot of the figures and data that we saw today. If you have any questions about the webinar, feel free to contact me. My contact information is listed on the current slide. And if I don't see any other questions, I don't believe I do. Thank you to those who came today, and we will see you next month.